Hello, everyone, and welcome to Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Carol Newcomb-Maludo, a member of CMC's Board of Trustees. It's great to see all of you here today, especially on such a gorgeous summer day yet. Today's forum is a very important topic, Opportunity Youth. Is brought to us with support from the Columbus Foundation and in partnership with Star House and the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio. Each are represented here by many friends and associates. Please help me thank them. Now, please welcome Mark Lomax, the Community Research and Grants Management Officer for the Columbus Foundation, to introduce our speakers today. Mark?
Thank you, Carol. The Columbus Foundation is proud to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club as they convene weekly public conversations on important community topics. Many children in Franklin County are born or thrust into complex circumstances that make basic staples like food and shelter an everyday struggle. Absent the resources and thoughtful guidance of caring adults, they must work extra hard to survive and navigate life, mostly on their own. Let's learn more about the challenges and the work being done to provide solutions to the plight of these young members of our community. Please welcome Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund, Tracy Nájera. CEO of Star House and Bischoff. Youth Action Board member, Destiny Higgins. And our host, journalist for Spectrum News 1, which I just learned about today, Tonisha Johnson. Tracy will start off with some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Okay. So I'm going to start off with just a statement that I hope we can all agree on. We all want Franklin County to be a place where all youth can be successful and flourish. Right? This is a shared value that all of us have. However, one of the things that we know to be true is this is not the case for so many of our youth within our community. So for this reason, the Children's Defense Fund has partnered with the Columbus Foundation on a report that takes a fresh look at some of the research and some of the current status of our youth within our community, those youth that we call Opportunity Youth. So we're talking about our young people ages 16 to 24 who are not engaged in school or in the workforce. And this population of youth, they represent a valuable community asset and resource that we really need to invest in. And for us to get a better look at who these youth are, what are their aspirations, what are the challenges and barriers that so many service providers in our community are working on every single day, we decided to do two things. We looked at a lot of quantitative data about these youth to get a better understanding of, what it is that we're talking about here. It's been several years since a report on Opportunity Youth has been done in our community. And secondly, to talk to the youth themselves. One of the most important things is elevating youth voice. And, any business owner would tell you the way to improve your business is to listen to your customer and to figure out what it is that they need and try to meet them where they are. And that was our purpose. That was our, I guess, the value proposition that we had in this work, and really, I think, the most valuable piece of the work that we did. So we conducted 40 focus groups that engaged around 40 youth within our community, representing so many different facets. So we went to Star House. We went to Equitas. We went to Columbus City Schools and talked to service providers there. So we looked at both the youth voice and also the voice of service providers that are on the ground working day to day, doing the best they can with the resources they have. And it was incredibly enlightening. And I just want to share a couple data points, and then we can jump into the conversation. So 6 of the areas that we really focused on were, number one, housing. So right now, what we know from data from other agencies within our community is that there are around 3,000 youth in Franklin County who are experiencing literal homelessness, and another 1,400 youth who are at risk for homelessness. Around health and wellness, from a state perspective, Ohio is one of 5 states with the largest number of children under age 18 who have experienced the most adverse childhood experiences. This is alarming, right? We're in the top 5 for this. In terms of education, one of the things that we learned from many of the service providers in our community is that many of our youth need support beyond, getting a GED or getting their high school diploma. Many in our immigrant and new American communities also need continuing language learning skills and just mentoring skills after that to engage in career pathways. In terms of support systems, Franklin County right now, and I'm drawing from a bunch of different data sets here, we have nearly double the rate of children in foster care than in other parts of the state. In terms of civic engagement, one of the things that we learned that I want to share is that many of the youth, so many that we spoke with in the focus groups, are excited and also very motivated to share their experiences with others in the community, be them policymakers, service providers, which they do, but they want to be part of the solution. And lastly, while Columbus is growing, many of its fastest growing occupations do not pay a living wage. So I just want to read a quote that we heard from one youth. They said, "It's not fair. I make $9 an hour and I'm still struggling." And in fact, this youth was still homeless and working. So I'm just going to stop right there, and I'm going to hand it over to Tonisha. But I'm really excited about this conversation because, ultimately, I think one of the things that we are excited about is that all these youth represent so much potential, and they have so many aspirations for their lives and for their children. And I think there's so many in this community that have a lot of energy that want to support them in that potential.
Thanks so much. I do believe that as we look at youth in Franklin County and even in the state of Ohio, that there are so many different issues, and I think that it can be a lot to digest. But as we look at the results of this study, there's one thing, I had one thing in mind and a direction to go, but I want to go back to something you said specifically, and that was the voice of youth, which often can be silenced, and they can often feel that way. So based on what you found, and of course Destiny can jump in too as she represents and advocates for youth, but what are they really saying? Because I think it's important to provide that context, because sometimes we don't hear what's most important to them and also what their biggest challenges are.
So I feel a little weird answering with you right next to me. So please jump in and you can help me answer this as well. But I can tell you from the focus groups, one of the things that we heard is that there's a deep sense that they're misperceived as maybe not trying as hard as they should or being responsible for the circumstances they feel themselves or that they find themselves in. And, that is not the case. I think that more than anything, we need to have more of a sense of empathy and also solution finding. These are young individuals who are motivated and want to find a solution to their problems. They're not sitting back waiting for something. They're working every day to do this, and they're very resourceful. And I think about my own children. I have a 17-year-old, and I think about how much I have to help him navigate day-to-day decision-making and modeling that decision-making, and how we have so many youth in our community that don't have that. and they're doing the best they can. And you know what? We all mess up sometimes, on a daily basis. But many times, children, especially like my son, they'll have someone that can, have that safety net for them and pull them back and coach them and pick them back up. And we need that. We need more of that for all our youth. Go ahead.
I completely agree with what you said as well, but I would like to focus more on, you were talking about jobs, as were you. I think that youth, yes, we want to have jobs, but think about it. Would you really want a job if you don't know where you're going to sleep, or the next time you're going to eat, or when you're going to be able to take a shower, or when you do get a job, maybe you're staying in a tent? So you don't know if your stuff's going to be stolen the second you're able to buy some stuff for yourself. So a lot of youth are terrified of maybe they're not going to be taken seriously at their job. Maybe they're not going to be hired in the first place because they smell and didn't take a shower. I think employers also need to be a lot more all-inclusive and include youth in more opportunities so we can prove, yes, I am ready for this responsibility.
And I would just add, the report points out the number of 15,000 to 20,000 young people in this group, 14 to 24-year-olds. And without context, we might be tempted to look at that number and say, oh, they're just lazy, rebellious teenagers who don't have aspirations. But as you've pointed out, this is simply not the case. They want to work, but they're by and large trapped in these catch-22 situations where if you don't have transportation to get to work, you can't pay for your rent, and you're out on your own. And what's more, they lack that safety net there that many of us have taken for granted as we emerge into adulthood. And so our services need to address that. It needs to be holistic to provide that safety net for youth as they're moving forward.
So let's go a little bit more deeper into that when we talk about what's really needed for youth to not just survive really, but to thrive ultimately, because it's not just enough to get a job. It's not just enough to say that I went to school, but there's more to that. So let's talk about that and what's really needed, not just from employers, but even beyond that.
For me, I look at this report and I see it as an opportunity for us to pause and to take stock and to think about what we really want for every young person in our community that's being raised in every single neighborhood. And it's housing, yes, but not just housing, it's rootedness. They need a place of permanence, a place of belonging, a place that they have the option to move away from. I think that's something that many of us who have housing and have always had housing take for granted. We have the option to move to a bigger house, to a different neighborhood. These kids are being uprooted time and time again. And so with the workforce piece of this report, we need to ensure, given that there's a lot of stopping and starting with their employment, as you pointed out, we have to ensure that the workforce development programs that we are offering, and all programs, frankly, are syncing up with the flexibility of their lifestyle. And there are some programs that do that. At Star House, we offer flexible workforce. We're growing this program where a young person can come in immediately into our drop-in center and have access to flexible training, flexible employment. There's more opportunity for us, especially in this day and age with IT, to offer these flexible opportunities with youth, for youth.
I would like to add that something that I don't know if the community already offers, because I haven't used it if they do, but vocational classes to train youth on how to present themselves at an interview, or what to wear, or anything that could make a potential employer say, yeah, no, I'm not going to employ this person. But there needs to be an understanding of, well, like you said, I belong here. And youth, well, me, I would quit a job if someone said, oh, well, why aren't you able to make it to work every day on time? You were fine last week. What's wrong this week? It's always something. Employers don't understand that there is something wrong. Like, we're not making excuses. We don't not want to come to work. I have a 2-year-old. Why would I say, oh no, I just don't want to go to work? Sometimes you can't make it because you don't have childcare, and it is terrible, and it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, and I want to add also, I mean, I think that part of this is also, I mean, so Columbus, Franklin County, we have a great myriad of services available for our youth. I think that one of the things we also need to do is change the narrative around youth, and especially this population of youth, and also recognize as a community, I mean, we talk a lot about brain development in early childhood. I think we also need to recognize the significant opportunity that we have, especially as the brain develops in adolescence. So you hear 90% of the brain develops in the first 1,000 days. That is true. And those brains will develop. And right after that, and into adolescence, the brain goes through a process of pruning, and they start developing more efficient neuron systems, and they start developing executive function, regulatory skills, impulse control, all those things that you need. So if we think about this age or this phase of development, there's a lot of opportunity here for employers, for educators, for service providers to really make a positive and significant impact on that brain development. And so I know I'm like at the 10,000-foot level, but I mean, I think that needs to be part of this narrative too.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think the prefrontal cortex, that space in your brain that produces rational thinking, doesn't fully develop until you're 24. And for most of us growing up with a supportive family, you're given the opportunity to practice independence and to fail, and then to have the safety net of mom and dad's house or mom's house during this time. But what we're talking about with Opportunity Youth are kids who do not have that safety net. They are not practicing adulting when they're young, when they're 16, 17, and 18. They are thrown out to be independent in that phase. And so our services have to recognize that. We need more holistic programs that are offering that safety net of services, healthcare, therapy, transportation, all the things that they need to get and stay on their feet. They're highly vulnerable.
I think it's good because honestly, even as we all here are in this room, it presents an opportunity for us to re-envision. If you have your own business or whether you work for a company, it gives or challenges us as the community to begin to rethink how we do things or how we run a business or how we manage. And so even having that youth voice becomes super important as you build a business, as you're building your community, as you build your teams, those that you are working with. So I'm wondering now, I mean, I think about as well, and going back really quickly to development with youth, I've worked on a few stories now where, kids, even with Head Start, they are struggling. They're experiencing trauma as early as 3 to 4 years old because of the opioid crisis, or because they've been put in foster care, or they too have become homeless. And so it's stunted their ability to learn. It's stunted their ability to enter into avenues where maybe your traditional kid who has a 2-parent home or who has those opportunities and resources provided for them, they don't have that. And so I think it challenges us as a community to re-envision things, but in doing so then, how do we go about doing that? What are some ways that we can potentially do that? What's the call to action, if you will?
Yeah, I think that there's several different pieces. I think that undergirding a lot of the work that we've done and looking at some of the recommendations that we're forming, and by the way, the report's not final, it's coming out in mid-October. But trauma-informed systems and trauma-informed care, and what does that really mean and look like in our services? I mean, I think that's a primary thing that's foundational to a lot of what we're recommending. We hear that, trauma-informed care, it's being used in all kinds of systems and all kinds of services, but, really digging into what does it look like with our folks that are interacting directly with youth? What does it look like in terms of programs and how programs are designed? Are we asking youth, whether or not they feel included or whether they feel welcomed in some of these programs and services. And then thinking about from the policy, digging back there as well, are our policies inclusive, and do they take into account that, we are engaging and we're trying to welcome youth that maybe haven't had, transportation there, they're suffering from mental health issues, maybe they're hungry, we have to consider all these different facets of who they are when they enter whatever system or program or service that we're providing. I think that's one of those. But also, Tonisha, I loved what you said, because one of the things that we really want to push on is this gives us a real chance to think about how can we redesign what we're doing. Like I said, we have so many great services and programs for youth in our community. And I look into the audience and I can see several people that are doing that work every single day. But how can we use this to redesign and rethink some of our approaches? Because there is obviously an issue if we're not making a dent or if we're not making the difference that we want to see, right, with many of our youth. And asking them, at every step of the way, how can we make this better? How can we make this more inclusive? How can you feel welcomed? How can we get you into transitional jobs that take into account that you have childcare, transportation, housing, all these other issues in place? How can you get mentoring to help, start modeling those, either behaviors or practices or, just talking to someone about your hopes and fears and aspirations in a safe place. These are all part of the recommendations that we're looking at.
You're absolutely right. The youth voice is the most important. They know better than anybody else what they need. And we're so fortunate to have the Youth Action Board in Columbus with members like Destiny who are weighing in, and they're being listened to often. And listening to them, to me, the call to action, it's 4 parts. We have to ensure that we're not just offering housing, but we're offering home, a space for up to 3 years for a young person to have the opportunity to gain certification in in-demand fields with livable jobs, rootedness in their community, where they don't have to worry about losing their housing during this time. The second is jobs. You pointed out there's nowhere in America where you can earn minimum wage and sustain your housing. You might be able to get it, you might be able to keep it for a time, but any emergency comes up and you're out of luck. And so we're fortunate to have Huck House and Star House and other agencies in town that meet that need. But we need more opportunities for flexible certification opportunities, such that there's opportunity for stopping and starting. We see youth at Star House who go to Columbus State, they enroll in a class, and then they have to choose between survival and staying in school. They choose to survive, withdraw, and then when they're ready to re-enroll, they have $1,000 in debt, $900 in debt. We need flexible employment education opportunities. The third piece is health and well-being. We take for granted having transportation, not having to take 2 hours out of our day to travel across town to a job. And so I'm very encouraged by the new Chief Innovation Officer at CODA, and I'm excited to see some of the ideas that come out of that initiative. Transportation is important. Health, we're talking about some young people who've had some trying experiences. They've seen horrific things. We have young people who've been pimped out by their parents. They've experienced severe abuse and neglect, no one to call on. And we have to ensure that they have access to the mental health care that they need so that they can get to work every single day and pay their bills and sustain their stability. The last piece, I feel like I'm being really wordy. The last piece is community. We know at Star House, we started out as a research project. One of the leading predictors of exiting homelessness is social connections, having people in your life, someone to call. Frankly, you get endorphins from people, and you need that connection with people. That's the glue that holds everything together. I see Starfish Alliance in the house. I see someone representing Open Table in the house. These are very strong mentor programs. We need more mentors, so look up Big Brothers Big Sisters and opportunities to invest in people in that way. They need us.
I'm curious to know, from a youth perspective, you advocate for youth. Even on both sides of the spectrum. We've heard, okay, well, what can adults do? is it, from your perspective, something that even youth need to be doing?
Absolutely.
And talk to us more about that.
I will speak from a personal level. Some people in here know how my upbringing, I was raised by a Marine. So he instilled a very large sense of discipline and self-discipline in me from age 7 and up. Before then, I was with my mother. A lot of traumatic experiences happened through that. But when I got to my grandparents' house, I started learning all of these different things that I would later on use in my life that I still use to this day. And a lot of what he raised me to believe and to practice every day is everyone is responsible for their own thoughts, actions, and decisions. And sometimes it is the youth's fault, but sometimes, like she said in the beginning, yes, we make mistakes, but one mistake should not be our downfall. We should always have someone to fall back on, but also with the health and wellness, we also need community leaders and mentors, like a few people that I know in here have helped me learn, well, you have to depend on yourself as well. And I am too used to depending on myself, so some of us need to allow others to help. Because when you've been through traumatic things such as being pimped, raped, molested, before you were even able to reach age 7, you're not able to maintain or even start being comfortable having human relationships. So it's terrible talking to a therapist or a mentor or anything until you're able to really sit down and make a connection with someone.
So as we've listened to all of these things about what we can possibly do, each and every one of us as individuals, I still have the question, though, and wonder, how do we do it in an equitable way? And I know when we use that word in different arenas, it means different things to different people. And I know especially when it comes to education, there is a struggle with that across the board. How do we provide? How do we support students in an equitable way? So in raising that question, what do you all say to that?
You know, I think that the first thing we need to do is really make sure that we're all examining the data. You can't really do anything unless you know where you're at, right? And I think about the data that we've been looking at, especially when it comes to education. That's kind of where my background is. But, you know, taking a look at the chronic absenteeism data, taking a look at out-of-school suspension and expulsion data, and digging into that, and rather than just looking at it and saying, oh, these are bad kids, or their parents don't care about them going to school, you know, I think I'm going to borrow your term, peeling back some of the layers of that onion and getting into, well, why? You know, why are they acting out? What is going on? Is there something going on in school? Is there something going on at home, in the neighborhood?
Why not?
Or why not, yeah. So, I mean, I think that, you know, digging in and asking those questions in whatever seat you're sitting in and trying to understand what's going on, I think that's key, rather than, you know, making an assumption about what we think might be going on. But I think that's the first piece. And then really looking at our structures. So when I was talking about trauma and thinking about our practices, our services, our policies, our programs, and thinking about, are they ready to receive the populations of people that we're trying to help? Is there something about our assumptions and what we've built into this structure of the system that is for some way creating a barrier? So I'll just pause. Those are the two main things that I would start with.
Yeah, I would just add 2 examples to that. One is truancy. You might think a kid is just skipping school because they're a rebellious teenager. But if you're a young person without running water at home or a laundry machine, you don't want to go to school stinky. So you're not going to go to school. I know I wouldn't. If I was in middle school, I'd do everything I could to not be made fun of by my peers. So we need to be more sensitive and pay attention to those truancy numbers and ask, what's going on? How can we help you to ensure that you're getting to school every day? The second is mobility. We have numbers of youth in schools. They're going to several different schools throughout the year. Something is wrong. Their parents are likely not just, moving to a larger home. They're escaping evictions and hopping from home to home. We take a lot of snapshot indicators of success here. One is housing, and this is an important number, but it doesn't tell the full story. Someone can be housed today and be considered a success, and then homeless 6 months later, housed again, and that's considered another success. True success is reducing mobility. Mobility is homelessness. Displacement is homelessness. Food
insecurity.
Food insecurity, this is another example.
And so as we think about all of those things, then just one last thing to kind of raise, perception. We kind of started out with that, but I want to come back to that because, again, sometimes we can have a perception of one thing, but it can really be something else. So how do we kind of help us or help ourselves, if you will, to kind of reframe that, if you will? How can we?
Some of us, well, I'm going to speak for myself. I don't like talking about the trauma. I don't like talking about, well, why are you this way? Why aren't you this way? I like to think about, okay, I'm here, now what? Okay, what's my next step? What's my next 5 steps? How do I get out of this? I think we focus, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the community is focusing on the homelessness and on all of these problems that we do have. But I also feel like we need to focus even more so on listening, because we ask a lot of questions. Since I've been on the Youth Action Board, there have been times where I've been in a room full of adults and with other Youth Action Board members like myself, other youth, and we're speaking and not one person in that room, well, that's an exaggeration. A lot of people aren't listening. They're just, yep, yeah, I hear you, yeah. But if you're hearing us, then why are we still here? I feel like, especially therapists and mentors, there's times where grown-ups give advice. Well, we're all adults. People give advice to others, and for us younger people, we're almost expected not to do well or need more help than others, or whatever the case may be. But these beautiful women were talking about flexibility. We need to, as a community, learn to be flexible with youth as well, because some of us, like I said, might not want to talk about it. We might not need housing. We might need this. We might not need that. We need to get to, okay, you're here. Let's not focus on it. Let's think about the positive and move forward.
So as we continue this conversation, for those of you that may have some questions that you would like to ask, we're going to open up the floor in just a couple of minutes for you to ask questions to our guests on the panel on today. And if you would, just please step to the microphone in the back here. And please make sure that it's a question and not a comment per se, but you definitely have the opportunity to ask them questions. I'm appreciative for the fact that you were open enough to be honest and open enough to be real about how you felt. I believe that sometimes youth are in a position where they feel like they can't be fully honest or they can't be fully open because the environment doesn't lend itself to that. So definitely grateful to have the youth voice. Really quickly, as you move forward with the Youth Action Board and as you work with her, what are some things that you guys are working on to advocate for youth even more, and kind of what direction even you yourself are you moving in?
I prefer to let Ann talk about the moving forward part, because that's, yes, I help, but she's better with words than I am, especially with stuff like that. But for me, I am just working on, I have a 2-year-old daughter. I'm working on being a single mom, and I just got a Section 8 housing, which I'm not too comfortable with because of my upbringing, but the help's there, so I'm forcing myself to accept it. And I'm looking to go back into school, and being here today, I think that I want to get into public speaking for advocating for youth.
Awesome.
So.
All right. Well, if we're ready, we will go ahead and start with questions. So we have the first person in the back.
I'm Judy Box. I practiced psychiatry for 40 years and am proudly retired for the last 2 years. I worked mostly in prisons, and I've traveled a lot in Europe, and I don't have a question, I just have an observation. They don't have these problems in most of Europe. We keep asking, what more can we do, what more can we do? I have a friend who just had a baby in Holland. She had home visits from nurses while she was pregnant. This is a middle-class, wealthy woman, by the way. Then she had a nurse coming to the house making sure the breastfeeding was going okay. Now she has a caseworker coming for 4 years to help raising the child. This is not unique to Holland. That kid gets to school where mom's had coaching all along, and the outcome, you get to school knowing how to behave, knowing how to deal with your feelings, and feeling safe and secure. You've made it. And most of these kids didn't have that by the time they were 5. I think if we got rid of our American arrogance that we do everything right and studied what they're doing in other places, and by the way, this kid gets into a school system where teachers are paid twice as much as they are here, and where schools aren't segregated by income. I can go on, but the answers are in Europe, folks.
Thank you. Yes, your question.
Appreciate that. I am quite tall. Well, first off, I just want to say amazing job, ladies. You guys are doing a great job digging into this discussion and forum. My question really is just more around self-sufficiency. You know, we hear a lot of, about the things, the programs that we're doing for the youth, and there's a lot of great programs going on in Columbus, Ohio, which a lot of these many individuals are help running. I just want to know, what are we necessarily doing to take these programs to help them become more self-sufficient, though? And that's really where my heart is okay, we're working collectively, we're doing so many things at one time, but, after a certain amount of time in that program, are we really seeing the progression that we're looking for? Can you guys just kind of speak to maybe some things that you guys are doing that maybe is working, or some data toward that?
I know that the Huck House has parenting mentors that will come to your house or that you can talk to that will help. So does Star House. So to answer your question, I don't know of any community resources that help after that allotted time is up. So I think that's a good question that you have. I'm not sure how to answer it, but I didn't think about that, because there is a huge problem and gap after that help. Then what? It's figuring out where to go and how to move forward.
And a lot of times, I think it also depends on, the youth or the type of situation they're in. For example, like for foster youth, there are certain programs that will help them transition to adulthood that support them through their mid-20s. For other youth, for example, who maybe were pushed out of their homes because their parents couldn't accept the fact that they were LGBTQ+. I mean, there's a variety of community supports that they can access or take advantage of. However, I think that more holistic or coordinated systems are needed. We're getting there. I mean, we're working on it as a community. But I mean, to your point, there's a lot more that we can do to make sure that youth are in a place where they feel safe, they feel housed, they feel that they can support themselves and their children. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
I talked before about the ramp up for young people as they're transitioning into adulthood, giving them the freedom to fail and be caught and encouraged to move forward. That's what our drop-in services provide at Star House now. Next year, in partnership with Finance Fund, we're going to be launching a Community First Village, where all on one site, one property, youth will have access to housing, also job training, access to jobs in livable wage, in-demand career fields, access to health care and therapy right on site so that they can get to their job every single day and sustain their housing. And then the fourth piece is community. Every young person there will have the opportunity to join an open table. This is, rather than the one-to-one mentor match, a 6 to 8 adult to 1 mentee match. They meet once a week, goal set, goal report, and move forward. And we believe that formula points towards self-sufficiency with supports. We all need supports. It doesn't matter how old we are. We always need a community of people in our lives.
I think even with that, it begins to what you're talking about, and that village it almost begins to form a cycle, if you will. So breaking one cycle, but then forming another one that's in a more positive light, a more positive way, a more positive pathway. Yes, long term. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name's Angela LaRiviere. Some people in the room know me. I grew up homeless and transitional, and I run 2 statewide programs, Youth Empowerment Program and Youth Move Ohio, that works with these youth that you're talking about, multi-system youth. So my question is around having this report, and it sounds great, and I do want to thank all of you for having this conversation, especially sharing your personal story. I know that's hard. But moving forward, is there going to be a process once the report is released that other youth could have feedback to that report, or also be involved in how that's going to be linked to policy and program change going for the longer term beyond the report, and if that plan exists? How to find out information, because our youth, I have youth with me here today, sit on a lot of statewide committees, and I think there's a lot of things going on, particularly around the ACEs and trauma-informed care committees that could be linked back to resources.
Well, I'm a big believer in the fact that you don't write a report if you don't plan on doing anything with it. So, yes.
Thank you.
So we should continue this conversation, but yes, I mean, we definitely want to make this action-oriented. We want to, put energy behind this and have this help drive those conversations and elevate youth voice to help us start rethinking, what we're doing in our community.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Wendy Patton. I'm with Policy Matters Ohio. Thank you for this remarkable conversation on this remarkable body of work. I have a question about the role of public investment and the level of public investment in these important services that you've been talking about. I'm acutely aware that 75% of people who are eligible for housing assistance don't get it. They're waiting lines. There's not enough money in the program. I think I heard you say that there are 3,000 homeless youth in the Franklin County area and another 1,400 at risk of homelessness. Do we have enough beds in wonderful places like the Star House to help all of them? How much more is needed? So I'm wondering, 1, are we investing enough? And 2, are we quantifying the need? And do we have a plan for investment?
A loaded question.
It is, thank you. We always need more investment in services for youth. This is a growing population. With the opiate epidemic, we mentioned before the growth in foster care, so we can anticipate, given the statistics related to aging out of foster care, that there will be more homeless youth just in looking at that change in trend. But we know at Star House, just in very real numbers, 5 years ago we served 531 individual youth, ages 14 to 24. This year we're on track to serve 1,500 individual youth and their small children. Last year we served 60 to 80 youth per day, that's individuals. This year we're seeing 120 to 140 per day. We are dangerously close to capacity at Star House, and we're exploring the addition of new satellites around strategically in different regions in our community. To do that, certainly we need more resources. We need a safe place that's open 24/7 where youth can access and get the resources that they need to move on. Thank you for that question. That's just one piece of it. We certainly need additional housing opportunities that go beyond temporary. Our youth need almost the college dormitory experience, where their housing is in check, they have access to all the resources they need so they can get their certification, I mentioned before, in check, so that they can launch fully and permanently into stability.
I would like to say that I do not think that the community is doing enough, obviously, but I am a firm believer in thinking about the glass being half full. So we are doing quite a bit, but even though we're not doing enough, we're still working on it. And I feel like as long as the youth, after they're done with these services, if they still need it, I feel like it's up to that youth or that family unit to go back and ask for that help again. And I feel like sometimes youth don't want to, because we say, oh, we already had it, what if we don't get it again, or I don't want to be judged, or just fear of failure, I guess, or fear of rejection is a big one I see with my own circle of friends and everyone. I think we have a big fear of failure in general. But it's I think a lot of youth need to just find the strength in themselves to get up and get it moving and ask for that help. Because a closed mouth does not get fed.
Next question.
Hi, my name's Helen Spicer, and I'm with WBNS 10 TV. First, Destiny, thank you so much. I think you are great with words, and you've just started your career in advocacy and public speaking today. So really thank you for being honest and sharing your story. My question is about awareness for the general public. I believe that when Columbus truly rallies around an issue or a cause, we tend to really move the needle, solve some of those issues. So I'm wondering how big of a barrier is general awareness with our regular Joe that isn't involved in the public sector or really hasn't had an opportunity to even see a Star House or a Huck House?
That's easy. People don't want to see it. People don't like, well, if you're a good, genuine-hearted person, I would hope that you don't want to see youth in any kind of negative predicament, even if it is their own fault. But I forgot. What was your question?
Your
Yeah,
answer.
see, I have a problem with being aware sometimes. Too.
How big of a barrier is just general awareness about this issue?
For the general public, I think that it's a huge issue that people don't want to talk about because it's uncomfortable, and I think it's through conversations like this and possibly doing an actual rally and having youth come to it and possibly lead it and just talk about it, because nothing's going to get done if I feel like it needs to be a youth-led organized movement, because no, I wouldn't listen. Being a youth, I'm not going to listen to an adult because you guys had different things growing up than we have now that are going against us. And I feel like if it's our life, so we need to be the ones that say, yes, this works, no, this doesn't, instead of letting other people speak for us.
I would add, youth homelessness is hidden oftentimes because the youth themselves are hiding. If you're a minor and you don't want to be forced to go to foster care, you're going to do everything you can to blend in and hide. That's why resources like Huck House and Star House, Center for Healthy Families, and Kaleidoscope are so important. We can live in our respective bubbles in Central Ohio, drive from our home to downtown and never see it, or never know that we're seeing it. My eyes have been opened. I started working with Star House almost 4 years ago, and it's remarkable now when I'm traveling and when I'm in Columbus, I see with new eyes a young person on the street in the middle of the day with a backpack, and I know that that young person is homeless. So you're seeing it, you just don't know it. And I think the beautiful thing about Columbus is when we do bring an issue like this to the table, people listen and they want to be engaged, and I've been encouraged with the engagement thus far, and I'm excited about where we're headed because I think as more people find out, we'll be able to do so much more for these youth.
And I just want to add, I think we have our work cut out for us, because even without this issue, I think adolescents, they get a bad rap anyway. And this isn't just true today, this is true for like the past 2,000 years, if you would read like what Socrates said about teenagers. But I mean, teenagers in general get a bad rap. And then you add on to it, teenagers, adolescents, young adults in their early 20s, that are facing these challenges where, okay, maybe you look like you're 18, you're really 16, but you're, maybe have the cognitive development of 12-year-old because of all the trauma and everything else that's gone into your life. But society wants to put on you the adult responsibilities and the accountability that you're just not ready for. So I think that sharing that narrative and shaping how we talk about this population to more of something strengths-based, where we're looking at them as assets. These are assets. These are young adults full of potential. We have to tap this, and make sure that we can all share in this. I think that's going to be really difficult for us, but I mean, I think we all play a part in it.
All right, one more question.
Hi, my name's Tina Husted, and I'm bringing the Open Table movement here to Columbus. We started this movement back in January, and as Ann alluded to, we're serving youth at Star House and a few other agencies here in Columbus. And I have two questions. My first question is to the audience. And I know this is a powerhouse full of audience, great people that have servant hearts. So the question is to you, do you have room for one new relationship in your life? If you have room for one new relationship in your life, you can get involved in Open Table, because that's exactly what it is. It's a volunteer organization to truly advocate and help one of these youth that we're talking about. They need relationships. They don't need transactional relationships. They need true relationships with people that will be there for them. And the second question I have is for Ann, and Ann is, you're such a shining light in helping these people. And I want you, if you would, share with everyone about the Community First initiative that we've been talking about, and how we can truly serve the youth that may be in the housing that's going to be put through the city.
Yeah, so we learned about the Community First concept by traveling down to Austin, Texas. There's a village down there. It's actually a tiny home village. 200 tiny homes. A quarter of the homes are set aside for staff, mentors, volunteers who choose to live on site and abide by the purpose of the property to build community with people. The other 3/4 of the homes are for chronically homeless adults who are coming out of that situation. They've recreated an ecosystem of housing, the community that should have been there all along. And I talked about this earlier, but there are jobs on site, there's training and in-demand fields right there on site, access to transportation, gardens, walking trails, community spaces, places that force that community. And so that's what this is all about. We've learned, as I mentioned before in our initial research with OSU, relationships are the difference maker. It's what causes homelessness, and it's what can bring people out of it. So thank you I should also point out Keisha's here from Columbus City Schools. They have a phenomenal mentor program as well. So please reach out to Keisha directly. Just kidding. I'm sure there's something online. You're going to get 500 emails. And then Starfish Alliance, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and certainly Open Table. You can reach out at starhouse.us/volunteer. Thank you.
So we have had some really great conversation today, good questions asked, and I believe that it is just the beginning and a continued conversation for many of you, though, in the room. And so we will go ahead and turn it over back now to Carol.
Thank you. Yes, I hope you've learned a lot today, and it's also given you something to think about. And I encourage you, volunteer. Open table may be it, maybe a mentorship. Maybe just think more about things like trauma-informed care and find out more about it. And also wait for the report that comes out in October and read it. You might find something in there that inspires you to do more too. And I know one of you mentioned the fact that most of us live in lives where we don't see what's going on. And you're right. And it makes me sad. Anyway. And I will try to look around a little more, especially about the youth who do stand on the side of the street or look like they haven't had a shower for 2 weeks somewhere sitting. And I think being more aware of that will make us more empathetic and maybe do more. Okay, I want to thank our sponsors today, our partners, the Columbus Foundation and Star House and Children's Defense Fund. Thank you. And of course, all our speakers, Tracy, Nájera, Ann Bischoff, Destiny Higgins, and Tonisha Johnson. Thank you very much.